When a parent dies, people talk about legacies. They mention his strength, his work ethic, the way he could fix anything with his hands. They speak of a life well lived, a phrase that feels as hollow as the house he left behind. But what I inherited, what truly mattered, was a key. It arrived not in a dramatic fashion, but in a manila envelope from his lawyer, tucked between the deed to the house and a copy of his will. A simple, tarnished brass key, attached to a small tag with a single typewritten word: greenhouse. My father had been a botanist, a man of soil and silence. Our relationship had been a map of misunderstandings, a lifetime of conversations that were like two different species of tree trying to grow in the same small pot, their roots forever tangled in conflict. He was quiet. I took it as disapproval. I was loud. He saw it as a lack of discipline. We had loved each other, I suppose, in the way that family does, with a love that is more obligation than affection, more habit than heart. The greenhouse was his sanctuary, a place I was never welcome. As a child, I'd press my face against the foggy glass, watching his broad, stooped back as he tended to his mysterious, unfriendly plants. He never invited me in. I stopped asking. After the funeral, after the neighbors had left with their empty casserole dishes and their murmured sympathies, the house felt like a tomb. I packed away his clothes, his books, his life, with a grim efficiency. I was ready to sell the house, to pack up the past, and move on, unburdened. I wasn't. The key felt warm in my palm, as if it had just been placed there. It waited on my key ring for a week before I drove out to his property on the edge of town. The greenhouse stood at the bottom of the garden, its glass panes streaked with grime, reflecting the gray, indifferent sky. It looked smaller than I remembered, more forlorn. The lock was stiff, but the key turned with a solid, satisfying clunk. The air that hit me was thick, warm and heavy, with the scent of damp earth and something else, something sweet and unfamiliar. It wasn't the sterile, orderly laboratory I had always imagined. It was a jungle. Vines cascaded from hanging baskets. Strange flowers with velvety, speckled petals bloomed in chaotic profusion. And in the center, bathed in the hazy light filtering through the dirty glass, stood a tree I had never seen before. It was small, with gnarled, elegant branches and leaves of a deep, impossible emerald. And it was covered in lemons. Not the bright, waxy yellow of supermarket fruit. These were pale, almost golden, with a blush of rose at their tips. They hung like small, luminous lanterns, filling the space with their clean, piercing fragrance. My breath caught. My father had never grown citrus. He specialized in rare, unscented orchids and ferns. This was different. Tucked into the branches of the tree was a small, sealed plastic bag. My hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, filled with my father's tight, precise script. Ilara, asterisk. If you are reading this, then you have finally come into my greenhouse, and I am gone. I suppose I should start with an apology. For the silence. For the distance. It was never because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you too much, and I was no good at showing it. Asterisk. I leaned against the rough wooden bench, the paper trembling in my hand. The humid air felt suddenly thin. You were always so full of light and noise. You were like a summer storm, and I was a man who only understood the quiet language of seeds and seasons. I didn't know how to talk to you. I was afraid my silence would smother your spirit, so I built this place, this wall of glass and leaf, to keep my inadequacy from dimming your light. Asterisk. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and sudden. All those years of feeling like a disappointment, of interpreting his quiet contemplation as a judgment. It had all been a story I'd told myself, a story I had gotten completely wrong. I read on, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This tree is a Meyer lemon, a variety I bred myself. It took me 15 years. I named it Ilara's Light. I started it the year you were born. I wanted to create something that was uniquely yours, something that could thrive, even in imperfect conditions. Something with a fragrance so bright, it could cut through any gloom, just like you. Asterisk. A sob escaped me, echoing softly in the glass-walled space. I looked at the tree, truly looked at it. It wasn't just a plant. It was a diary. It was a testament. It was 15 years of patient, silent love, poured into soil and root and branch. Every pruning, every feeding, every moment of care had been a word he couldn't say to me. The fruit is sweet, with only a hint of sharpness. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of any of it. Asterisk. There was more. Wrapped in another layer of plastic at the bottom of the bag was a small, worn photograph. It was of him, holding me as a baby. I couldn't have been more than a year old. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking down at me, and his face, his face was etched with a raw, unguarded tenderness I had never seen in all my life. It was a look of absolute, awestruck love. I pressed the photo to my chest, right over the ache that had lived there for as long as I could remember. The world outside the greenhouse, the overgrown lawn, the silent house, the gray sky, blurred and vanished. It was just me and him, and the profound, echoing silence that was no longer empty, but filled with a meaning I was only now beginning to understand. I sat on the dusty floor of the greenhouse for a long time, the letter and the photograph spread before me. Every sentence was a key, unlocking a different chamber of my heart, releasing years of stored-up hurt and misunderstanding. He hadn't been distant because he didn't care. He had been building me a monument. He had been speaking to me in the only language he truly mastered, the language of growing things. Weeks passed. I didn't sell the house. I began to spend my days in the greenhouse. I learned from his meticulous journals, from the notes scribbled in the margins of his plant guides. I learned how to water, how to prune, how to listen to the silent needs of his beloved collection. I repotted orchids, untangled vines, and watched as Alara's light continued to thrive under my hesitant care. One afternoon, I finally worked up the courage. I reached up and gently twisted one of the golden lemons from its stem. I took it into the kitchen, the house that no longer felt like a tomb, but like a place he had simply stepped out of. I sliced the lemon in half. The scent was extraordinary, filling the entire room. I squeezed the juice into a glass of water. I took a sip. It was exactly as he had said, sweet, with only the faintest, most beautiful hint of sharpness beneath. It was the taste of forgiveness. It was the taste of a conversation, started 15 years too late, but finding its way to me at last. I didn't waste it. I made lemonade. Not the cloyingly sweet kind, but the kind that is both sweet and bracing. I made a curd, golden and bright. I shared it with neighbors, the same ones who had brought the casseroles. I started a small business, selling the fruit and the products I made from it at the local farmer's market. I called it Alara's Light, and that's where I met him. An older man, a friend of my father's from the university. He stopped at my stall, picked up a jar of lemon curd, and smiled a sad, knowing smile. He did it then, the man said softly. He always said he was growing this for his daughter, that it was his life's work. You knew? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He talked about you all the time, Alara. He never knew how to talk to you. It was his greatest regret. Before he left, he handed me a small, folded piece of paper. He asked me to give you this, if I ever saw you with the tree. He said you'd know what it meant. That night, in the quiet of the greenhouse, surrounded by the living, breathing legacy he had left me, I opened it. It was a simple line, in that same tight script. The most beautiful things take time and silence to grow. I was always proud of you. Asterisk. That was the moment I finally understood. Not all love is loud. Not all legacies are made of stone or money. Some are grown in quiet greenhouses, nurtured for years in silence, until they finally bear fruit, sweet and sharp and life-sustaining, long after the gardener is gone. My father hadn't left me a void. He had left me a living, breathing, golden-lit truth. And in its quiet, persistent light, I was finally learning how to grow.